All right. Hi, everyone. So this is November's JavaScript Breakpoint. Yeah, we have a couple of things to cover, so I don't want to spend too much time kind of introducing it, but it is worthwhile noting that our resident primal noise gargling maker is not present today. So if that is what you came for, you are going to be very disappointed. But maybe we can make this up by...
Skulk's primal beard.
Yes, primal beard and Mike's non-primal hair. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that was like the worst intro ever. Like you have one episode where you have one episode where Ben isn't here to do his primal noises and everything goes to shit. All right. Okay, let's dive into it. So we have a couple of things to talk about. What happened in November, also known as Not a Number November 2023. So, okay, we had some naughty Google boys. Xando, I actually think you are most qualified to talk on this. I have some opinions, but I like this is kind of the type of thing that I would consider like a very Xando topic, if that makes sense.
Yep.
All right. Do you want to tell us what web environment integrity is, and also why there was a lot of drama around it this month?
Okay. So, web environment integrity was a proposal, design idea. It was never like a proper. It never really entered a standards process. It was a proposal or a design idea for creating a web standard for attestation. Now, attestation is a thing where a third party inspects the second party you're dealing with. You trust this third party. You trust both their integrity as well as their technical capability. And this third party tells you stuff about the second party, and then based on that, you can make a decision, right? So how this works, for example, in Android, they've got something called Play Integrity, which used to be called... it used to be called, man, it was the name. It's funny because that's the name that I usually remembered it by. Integrity.
Well, let me quickly Google it. What would be the Android equivalent?
No, it is Play Integrity. Play Integrity is the Android equivalent, but it used to be called something else that people might know it now. Safety Net, right? So
what a
basically
name.
what that did is it's kind of like an app that Google had. I say app, but it's like part of Google's Play services, this functionality that has it installed, and this code checks out what your phone is, like whether it's rooted or whether it's not rooted, and like with what other things you might have installed, and like it's not really clear what it does because it's closed source. And it basically allows other apps to ask, hey, what do you think about this particular device that we're on? Like, is it meeting a certain standard, or does it do or not do certain things? Like, is it rooted, is it not rooted? That kind of thing. Although Play Integrity is not the only one that does this, that you would think Google is in the best position to make a judgment call on this. So web environment integrity was a way to do something similar, where a website would be able to ask the browser, hey, the attestation rather about the browser, and say like, hey, is this specifically it was designed to be, is this a real user? Is this a real user? That was the motivation. Right? The problem is the only way that an attester can be confident that the browser is being operated by a real user is if you are effectively no longer the ultimate administrator of your computer. Because if you are, then you can install stuff that could trick the attester, right? Like, for example, I have on my custom ROM rooted non-Play services phone managed to trick safety net and Play Integrity. Obviously, I didn't figure out how to do this myself. Other people who are kind of more involved in the mobile ecosystem do this, and then.
Is this essentially spoofing?
Yeah, I'm spoofing it. Yeah, basically.
Okay, cool.
And in the mobile ecosystem, they're trying to go so far as to have like hardware-backed attestation and that kind of thing, which who knows? Maybe you need to have some kind of like TPM key in your trusted platform module, which is a part of your chip. This could go all sorts of ways, but the point of it is that the only way it can really work is, especially for normal people that don't necessarily understand that you could, I don't know, like do some really complicated command line stuff to like work around it. Like for most people, that's not going to happen. So it means they're no longer really the ultimate administrator of their device, and they might not be able to install certain things or do certain things that they might want to. And that's a problem, because you are not going to know what this code does. And on top of that, it's anti an open web, because it would allow the certain websites to refuse access to people who did not meet a valid attestation for whatever they're asking for. And the initial intent was like, is this thing machine operated, right? So it's initially the proposal came off the back of a huge scandal where it turns out that Google, when it sells ad, has like premium ads where it guarantees that these ads that you are only going to be charged for these ads. They're first of all going to be shown to real users, and only on interaction of some kind with the advertisement is it going to like really play, and are you going to be charged? And like turns out that an independent party like published a paper that showed that there are these huge kind of like bot farm things that trigger these ads as if they were legit. So Google's got a big problem because they've effectively been overcharging their customers, and
their engagement isn't what they say it actually is.
Yeah, isn't what they say it is, and so on and so forth. And like, one can argue about whether they knew about it or not, or whether. But anyways, point is, like, it came.
Sorry,
off the back
before
of
we
that.
go further down this thing, do you know if this has any implications on fingerprinting? Because I feel as though it'd be a
concerns around that as
pretty
well.
Okay.
There were concerns around that as well.
But we also need to talk about hypotheticals, because it has kind of been shot down. So
Yeah.
it's
So it has
there's
been shut
no
down
prospect of
mostly.
this being a thing anymore. But yes,
Mostly, it's still like not completely dead. Right. The other thing
in its
was, is that-
current form.
Yeah, baked into their proposal was this idea that it would have a built-in failure rate where the browser was meant, or the attester was meant to like, I can't remember the exact details, but like either a negative or inconclusive result like every X times, even though it could give a good answer. The idea being that as a result, people who were asking for attestation would not really be able to make a fair judgment on whether or not they should deny access because they got a non-positive result back. Because there was like an inherent built-in failure rate. Honestly, if this had gone through, I would expect that in practice they would just deny it anyway, and then eventually they would take that requirement out, because it means that legit users will be blocked some of the time. So this stuff is important for like advertising networks, and it is important for like making sure, for example, that you are dealing with a real user, especially in cases where like people are meant to be talking to real people, for example. You're not dealing with a bot. Like, it might be easier for certain types of scammers to automate at least like the initial part of running a scam with the user in like a real-time interaction, and then the same way that for like legit websites have these help chatbots, and then at some point it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to hand you over to a real agent now. Except of course scammers would not make that clear.
So the main so at a surface level, I think most people's understanding of this and why it's problematic is that kind of a lot of people effectively claim this is like DRM for the web.
That's what it ends up
Yes.
being, right? Because the
Yes.
attester might say, oh no, this person's got an ad blocker installed. Even if it's not that clear, it might be like, okay, well, this is not a clean environment, right? There are there's certain extensions installed that have the ability to intercept network requests.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is what an ad blocker has, right? That's why it
Yes.
works that way. So that's the kind of thing that it might attest to, and as a result, like you don't get. And the thing about DRM, like, is it means, and that's with all DRM, is you are not the ultimate administrator of your device.
Exactly.
Which is why the Free Software Foundation calls it defective by design. Or they've got like that campaign. They call
Yes.
it digital restrictions management.
Yes. And in my experience, you'll see even like this that I'm linking over here. Like someone posted like the actual write-up of it in asshole design on Reddit, which is amazing. But I think like unilaterally there was like outrage about this. I don't think anyone, unless they were arguing in bad faith or were trying to be divisive or so forth, actually said, I think this is a good idea. And like, honestly, shame, this repo, I think in June, so currently it's completely dead. In June, I think it was locked down and no issues or pull requests or anything were allowed anymore, because people were just trolling this repo so hard. Like, they were just
trolling is honestly not the worst that I saw on those issues.
Well, that as well. But like, people were like creating pull requests that delete the entire repo, and they're like, please merge and stuff like that. And people were just going, and and you can't fight the internet. You also can't fight like bad public sentiment on the internet.
I mean, you say that, but they did actually get like Vite and that kind of DRM in the media extensions thing. Like they did get that in. Still angry with Sir Tim Berners-Lee about that.
Yes,
but anyway, that a standards body is more of a thing that like is a reference and a record than like an instruction. Like it's meant to and it's meant to help with alignment and all that stuff. But I don't know, it just never sat right with me. Having said that, I obviously haven't walked in his shoes, so I don't know what I would have done. But like I was not happy with it. And this is kind of like a similar echo, and I'm happy that it went a different way. When I said it was still not completely dead, so
I think they're still pursuing it for WebView.
Android web views, right? But that's more in the case of like, let's say you are the manufacturer of a particular a developer of a specific application that has a web view, and then you want to like attest something about the app or the environment there, right? Because that way, maybe the idea is that web view is supposed to actually be a trusted execution environment. In which you do JavaScript stuff, where I think, the scope is constrained enough that totally makes sense, because it's not really about the general internet. The problem with this and the open web is that like certain browsers, thankfully enough browsers took a position that they weren't going to implement it, like Mozilla and Brave and those kinds of browsers. And the problem with having this being in a standard is that if you don't implement it, you're like not a real browser, right?
Yes.
And imagine if you're using a browser and you can't view the New York Times and I don't know, Google and Reddit and all
hashtag peer pressure,
Twitter and Facebook and all sorts of things. Then what you're going to do as a user, you're going to switch. You're going to switch for a while. Maybe if you're really principled, you'll use another browser just for those websites, and eventually you're just going to get tired of having this like weird siloing,
or not being able to use your extensions or whatever.
Yeah, all this kind of thing. Like you're just going to switch, and then eventually the other browsers are going to cave. So I'm happy it didn't go through. Very, very happy.
Some of these are amazing. Sorry, I don't know if you're laughing at this.
The thing that outraged people is this proposal wasn't created on an official kind of like Google GitHub account. This was just some employee.
Some random guy.
It was a proper
some
proposal.
full guy.
Like, it had, like, these employees, and they were 4 people, and they were all Google people. And in every other way, it was done as a proper proposal. And it did take a few months before like people really picked up on it, which made it feel so sneaky. And that's the thing. It's like, we're just trying to backdoor this in, right? That's what it felt like. And anyway, so that's what it's about. It got axed, yay! And also not only that, they'd done the proposal. They'd merged code into Android Chrome to support this, which has now been removed.
Interesting.
Not only was it a proposal, there was code merged.
Like it's like Microsoft Internet Explorer days all over again, and you brought up Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and I think actually he has a lot of positions that one might find surprising if you actually delve into it. Like, I think he isn't necessarily opposed to having a monopoly in terms of browsers or whatever. Like, he isn't necessarily but the point being is that I think in terms of just like kind of the health of the web, having a monopoly of browsers or browser rendering engines, like, this is where you end up going, is that at some point you can do what you want with very little resistance.
Google's already there.
but-
They've steamrolled a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, all right, let's move on. This is a long one. I just appreciate where someone's like, can someone please explain this in 2 words? And one person said, internet's sad.
Internet
All right.
sad. No, well, I mean, WebDRM is the 2-word explanation.
Yes.
And it has been axed, and that's great, and I'm very happy about that. And keep
I
your
also
eyes
just
peeled.
want to
I'm sure
ask.
this is going to come back in some way. And
Yes.
Apple, by the way, already shipped attestation. They have a way to do this. It's famously used by Cloudflare to reduce the amount of times you're actually presented with a CAPTCHA. So there are good use cases for it. But I wasn't too upset about the Apple thing because, one, I don't own an Apple anything. But even just in principle, is because it was always intended to be just limited to like, WebKit and Safari and the Apple ecosystem. Inherently already, rooting your phone is not something that is even remotely supported for iOS. Apple is already the ultimate administrator of your device anyway, so that doesn't change anything. And on top of that, Apple as a company isn't selling your data. Like, you're not the product with Apple, the product's the product. You pay a lot for it, but at least you know the product's the product. So, and they have made, meaningful strides in the privacy arena. So from that perspective, and also it was attesting fewer things. So from that perspective, I think it's not the same. Like, comparing that to what Apple did is like comparing apples and oranges.
Apples and Googles. I just quickly want to ask, so the rain is quite intense here. You guys should let me know if it makes a lot of noise on my side.
I now know the rain is very intense because you said so.
Okay, you can't hear it then, I assume. All right, let's move on. So next thing is, Vite 5. Vite 5 shipped. So last time we spoke quite a bit about Vite 5, specifically the implications in terms of Remix actually now no longer maintaining their own build process, but instead using Vite under the hood. I saw Redwood is also kind of doing that as well. Chances are we're never going to see Next do something like that, because Next inherently, it's in their best interest. Yeah, it's in their best interest to have their own closed ecosystem. And I think last time we spoke about that a bit, and I do find it a bit troubling. But so Vite 5,
How is
yes?
TurboPack closed?
No, I don't mean TurboPack. I mean like just the whole Vercel Next.js dynamic. So there is efforts with OpenNext to kind of make a lot of that stuff interoperable with Netlify and whatever. But at the moment with Next.js, there's a lot of stuff that's basically purely just for Vercel, and it's very hard to actually get working on other platforms. So like I was more speaking to that than TurboPack itself. But one thing that I found interesting that I actually only found out now today is Rolldown, which effectively, Mike, do you know anything about Rolldown?
I'm afraid I'm not the guy for that one.
We're going to have to hand over to
Vite 5.
Xandor again.
So I know the Cliff Notes. The Cliff Notes is roll down, is roll up, written in Rust.
Yes. So effectively, I can maybe speak
yet.
to this a bit. So effectively, roll up is kind of effectively the big like module resolution thinger that has been used like in Webpack, in Vite, and so forth. Roll up is also one of the reasons why something like Webpack really took off, because it was I think it was one of the first ones that did tree splitting, correct?
Yeah, tree shaking.
Tree shaking, tree splitting. Roll up, roll down, tree shaking, tree splitting. Man, like, who comes up with these terms? But yeah, so
Everywhere
Vite
else
has
it's called dead code elimination. I don't know why we call it tree shaking.
like the same reason why we. Okay, I'm not even going to go into it. The same reason why we have ruins and we have observables and we have signals, because every framework needs to have their own name for something that's already established.
No, observables
I mean,
and
how
symbols
else do you
are
feel the
well-known
hype
things,
train?
But runes,
Sorry.
I'm not so sure.
No, like I was being facetious, but I couldn't think about a better example, so I just went with that. But give me enough time; I'll come up with a better example next time. So so effectively, what Rolldown is it's rewritten in Rust.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
Is Vite 5 using Rolldown, or is Vite 5 just making provision to
Yeah,
use
that's it.
Rolldown in the future?
Yeah, so some of the changes they made was to make that more possible.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
where things are going to end up.
And
so
I
I'm
assume
quite-
that would. Mhm.
I'm quite happy about it because I actually just very
Same
recently
here.
moved a production build process from ESBuild to Vite, which still does use ESBuild for transpilation under the hood, but not for like the bundling and the module graph. And the difference in build times, we went from like under 2 seconds to like 40 seconds, right? It's the exact same code with the same ESBuild options. And the reason why we did that is because it's not so great when you've got differences between your development setup in terms of like what you're using and your production setup. It also means that if we wanted to use any like advanced kind of loaders, there's very little we could do because the amount of overlap in terms of syntax between like ESBuild, like being able to handle certain modules and Rollup being able to do that, which we were using the Vite and then the Rollup for like the dev experience because it's a lot better because ESBuild famously doesn't support fast refresh. And this particular application, a full page refresh, takes a long time, partly because we're transitioning from a different, much older framework to React, and that old framework, the way it does stuff, it's just super slow to just even load all of its JavaScript, but we can't start until it starts. So like, point is, it's like super slow. We needed that fast refresh. But then to build it with just ESBuild, it was difficult. So then we just moved it to Rollup. So I'm excited for Rolldown because that could be like a meaningful improvement in the build performance as a result.
Yeah, no, it's like super exciting stuff, and I also think like there's a lot of new like plug and play integration stuff with Vite 5, which is very interesting and very nice because like what it was like 4 or 5 years ago where you still had to set up your own Webpack and like just getting like TypeScript to work with Webpack and whatever was like a nightmare. So do
I need to use TS Loader or do I use the Babel plugin or what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah, and then you have to like,
that.
what is the relationship between the TSC compiler and Babel and
Now there's just
it was a
Deno,
mess.
just putting it out there.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, you don't even need a bold step. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's baked in.
Right.
I was going to say the big perf improvements were in Vite
Yes.
4.3 though, right? Like that was the one that they touted as being like so much faster because I think it was like caching or something that they added in the build process. They changed how the hot module reloading works. Remember right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I saw massive increases when switching to 4. So I think there's been a lot of performance-related things coming now for a very long time. And I also think a lot of the Vite 5 stuff is very forward-facing. It's not necessarily like, cool, boom, here's some awesome stuff. But I think what's exciting about it is like there's a certain commitment to going somewhere, which is very exciting.
I upgraded and I got a massive list of warnings about things that are deprecated.
Yes.
Which is, I think, promising. That sounds like they're making improvements on the API, so it's a win in my books.
100%. Cool. All right, next. Angular is a thing. Still a thing again, but it's a thing. And it has a new logo, which looks a bit Adobe-ish, I'm not going to lie. So Angular 17 got shipped. A lot of interesting things. Hydration. Mike, I don't know how much you know about it.
We're putting so much on Xandor's plate, but Xandor was telling us how lovely the keynote or whatever it was for Angular 17 was.
It had a lot of
yes.
And I'm very happy about it because I think it makes Angular more viable. But I think anyone working with a modern framework probably wouldn't be as pumped because I feel as though a lot of these things are expected at this point. And that's not even looking at something like Vue, which is kind of a little bit ahead of the curve with a lot of things. So yeah, super exciting. I mean, like, I think Angular supported Vite for a while now already. But then being able to support server-side rendering without the universal thing, and it seems like they're getting a whole bunch, or getting things trimmed down. We spoke about, we were talking about the syntax earlier. They're stealing a little bit of Svelte's control flow syntax, which is nice. It's fewer ngIfs and.
It's not just the syntax, so there's actually meaningful performance improvements before using that syntax as well, because of, I don't know, it uses a different code path in the template.
They went and stole the code from Svelte, hopefully.
No, but I'm all for that. I'm 100%
Yeah.
all for it. Yeah.
As a result, it means that it's just a much faster code path because there's less work it needs to do. And it supports else if now.
It didn't support that before?
No, not so the ngIf directive kind of things.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't do else if. You could get that kind of logic working, but you had to use like variables and something like that.
Okay. Oh, you'd have to build it yourself, essentially.
Yeah, well, you could get the logic working, but as a workaround, like it's the kind of thing where you can't just go else if, and now you can, which is cool.
Nice. Yeah, like, and I think we need to be honest that like none of us are really the target market for Angular. Angular is a good fit if you have like a big team or like C# developers and who knows what, and
Java
like
devs.
you maybe or you have two front end guys. And you want other people to meaningfully be able to talk or contribute to the front end part as well.
So what I would say is,
yes.
Angular is a front-end framework by back-end developers for back-end developers.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
Yeah.
and that's like funny, haha, look at Angular, but which is, that joke is old now. But
yeah,
it's actually got a great source of truth. Like if you have a lot of people that have a lot of experience in C# or Java or that kind of world, where everything there's like dependency injection, all the things, and actually one of the big features in Angular 17 is they now have new dev tools for dependency injection specifically. So if you have a situation where like, why am I not getting the thing here? Why are there two instances of a thing that should be a singleton? Like that kind of thing. These dev tools can help you debug that.
100%.
I mean, I have used Angular. So that's amazing because you used to have to kind of just, it was hard. You had to guess.
And if you're working with like Mesh.js or something, then it makes a lot of sense. You can follow the same mental models and there's a lot of commonality in that kind of Spring-based approach around things, which isn't awful. But I think what's awesome is like Angular's starting to become a competitor. Like it's got signals, it's got some cool things coming in the pipeline. I think it's good.
It also has vastly improved rendering performance, like 90% faster now. That's partly because of the improvements they made to the templating themselves, but also if you're using the control flow syntax and because it just has a much shorter code path. But I'm going to be honest, I'm still not that impressed because I did actually have a look at the benchmarks, and they are independent benchmarks. They do link to them. And I compared just Angular with the new control flow to like React with hooks. And in many cases, Angular was like a few milliseconds faster in the sense that it'd be like, to render 1,000, like, I don't know, to insert 1,000 rows, it's like 22 milliseconds instead of 25. It's those kinds of differences. Apart from swapping rows, there's a meaningful difference there, which, cool. But apart from that, almost all the differences are there, and every once in a while React's a few milliseconds faster. And the reason why I'm not that impressed with that is because React, the views are templates, right? It compiles those.
Yeah.
It compiles those. Every template gets turned into like its own unique, special, optimized kind of like, in theory anyway, function to render that specific view. Whereas JSX is syntactic sugar for okay.
No, 100%.
Speaking, the create element function in practice with the new automatic runtime, it's a slightly different function, but it's pretty much the same thing. Like the mental model is still accurate there. And at runtime, that function creates a slice of the VDOM, which is your kind of like element, your React element, and then assembles that into a second VDOM tree, then diffs that VDOM tree against the previous VDOM tree, creates a strategy for what work actually needs to happen. So, like, it does all this work that, in theory, a template doesn't need to do. And that for me is a little bit like the whole idea between templates. There's a trade-off between in templates and something like JSX. There's a trade-off between performance and kind of flexibility or expressivity, and that's kind of like not playing out here. I'm glad that it's 90% faster. That will be really nice. But I kind of feel like, I don't know, it should be faster, right?
I feel as though the target shouldn't be React. I think React is considered a slow framework nowadays. If you compare it to things like Solid or Svelte or
Solid,
Quick
And for exactly
the
that
modern
reason.
frameworks.
Yeah, but for that exact reason, like, with Svelte or whatever, you can't really compete with templating, because with templating,
you shouldn't be able to, in theory, right?
yeah, in theory, the laws of physics just means that Svelte will always be faster than React, no matter what. Which is, I think, what Xandor is actually saying here. It's like strange that it's template based and it's still marginally.
So sorry, I wasn't clear with what I was. Maybe I wasn't clear there. I was saying that they shouldn't be aiming for React. They should be aiming for faster than that, because based on how Angular works, I would expect them, like, the target shouldn't be React. The target should be something like Solid, where things are rendering on the fly. Like, that should be the competition.
Target is React specifically, right? Well, I mean, maybe from a marketing perspective, obviously they'd like to be able to say, "Hey, we're just as fast or faster than React."
Yes.
That's going to be a thing that, like, enterprise CTOs that don't know how to code a front end are going to care about.
Yes.
They are. They're going to be like, "That's great." But like, still. Anyway, I feel like they should have already been kind of keeping up with React. I'm glad that things are getting better. There seems to be new life into it. This is a big release. They have things like, they call it deferred components, so it's lazy.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Which is like, is that like suspense or what is it?
In a way, there's not quite suspense, but it's lazy loading. Like, literally in the talk, they're like, okay, so lazy loading, deferred. What's the difference? There's no difference. We like deferred. So that's the kind of
language that JavaScript uses.
That's true. I do quickly want to mention, in terms of just the general discussion between, like, templates versus something like JSX, there is actually, technically speaking, like, a proposal out there called ESX, which is supposed to bring the benefits of both, but, like, it would only really work if this were as a standard, kind of like built into the browser.
Here's the interesting thing. I think there's a lot of people actually from Google that are actually pushing that, which is very interesting. Because, like, a lot of people would think, like, JSX is like React. I think a lot of people think, it's React's way to do templates or whatever. But it's interesting. Some like I can't remember the guy's name, but, like, there's a very senior developer at Google, and I think he works on Angular as well. I'll maybe put it in the notes. Who's actually pushing for something JSX-like in the browser quite hard. And I actually think, like, this connotation of JSX as React specific, is not doing us. It's kind of doing us a disservice, because I actually think JSX is amazing, just as an actual approach. But yeah.
That's why I like Solid so much, man.
To the ESLint
agreed.
thing. There's a guy called Andrea Giamacci, also known as Web Reflection, and he created a few libraries. I think he's the guy that does either HyperApp or, like, Undom, or, like, a few things like that.
Oh, one of those. There's a couple of them, like Van.js as well, and
so he is like a maintainer of like an actual kind of like web framework. HyperHTML, that's the one. He's the HyperHTML guy. HyperApp.
Oh, okay.
And
I
he's
forgot
got a
about
lot of
HyperApp.
Good thoughts. Like, his blogs. HyperApp's got, like, super great performance. I think they do have 100% test coverage for, like, everything. And he did, like, he basically, his approach to, like, templating was so similar to Lit that when it came out, it was like, Lit, did Did you guys copy his homework? Did you
Yeah.
copy his homework?
And-
Because it looks like you copied his homework.
Yeah, and here's the thing is like, and I think like who would benefit the most from something like ESX is web components. Like I think
Yes.
like ESX would be like rocket fuel for web components.
What's
Because
nice
the
about
big problem with web components at the moment is you have kind of some parts that are declarative, and then you have other parts that are still very much stuck in imperative land, where it's like DOM node, do thing with DOM node, do something else with DOM node. So I think like having something like ESX would really make the web component story much more appealing.
What's also interesting about ESX is that you, like with JSX, be able to like say, okay, what actually happens under the hood when this code is like run or called or whatever. But yeah, so it's not something that would be like specific to only certain frameworks. Really, like in theory, any framework could then adopt it.
Exactly.
It's their own template or not based implementation under the hood.
Yes, and it's a way. It's a way to write functions at the end of the day. It's just a way to write functions as XML instead of imperatively. All right. Cool. Let's move on. Here's an interesting question. Are there more versions of Angular or versions of Fast and Furious? And the answer is there's only 10 versions of Fast and Furious, which is a bit
Does that
disappointing.
include spin-offs though? Are I feel like we should count spin-offs just to even the scales.
Hold on, have I been missing out on Fast and Furious spin-offs?
Also, is that like the Game of
spin-offs.
Thrones? What's it? Khan Drogo, or what's the guy's name from?
Fish, Aquaman.
Oh no, it's Aquaman. Okay, sorry.
Isn't it the
Gee,
same dude?
Possibly. Like he has that solid like barbarian vibe going.
First of all, there's the 1939 film, so that's another extra one, right?
1939. What?
Yeah, way before
Fast and
Angular.
Furious.
Like, yeah.
What? Okay, this conversation is
There's
okay.
Fast and Furious Spy Racers animated series, which has a whole bunch of episodes. If we're counting every episode, then Angular's got a lot of catching up to do.
Okay, so Angular has more numbers, but Fast and Furious has that longevity going. So, but less numbers. Okay, more calendar days. All right, there we go.
Then there was what? Hobbs and Shaw, which is a film called Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. So it's not just 10 movies. Like, it's more than that.
Okay, well, there you go.
You might have to add AngularJS in here to level the playing field.
Yes, like, but apparently, like Mike said before we started, that apparently in Fast and Furious 9 they go to the moon or they go into orbit or
Space
something.
or something.
Let me actually Google that. Fast and Furious
It's
9
epic. It's epic.
space. Holy shit!
It's a thing.
You weren't joking. Going to space.
Yeah. That's a pod racer, basically.
I love the vintage.
What is it called? Okay, let's move on. All right, Deno 1.38. So it seems like there's a lot of KV stuff being released. I was mostly just following the KV stuff back when it was just announced, but haven't really followed further than that. Mike, I think now is your time to shine. Want to tell us a bit about what exactly Deno KV is and what we're getting with 1.38 as well?
Yeah, so 1.38 and the KV stuff a little bit independent, but just there's been a lot happening in the Deno space the past month, which is super exciting. So KV is a key value store. It's built on top of Foundation B if you're using it in production, and it's a distributed key value store, essentially kind of like Redis. Your keys can be like an array of values. So you could say like user ID, for example, and get your value for a specific user.
Oh, really? Nice. Okay.
Yeah. It's like when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is kind of like a cache. And then when I dug a bit further, it's actually, it's pretty ergonomic. And then ACID compliant. And then
Yeah.
you can also pick between eventual and strong consistency. If you scroll, there we go. For me, that is something that is so cool because you can essentially opt in to, exactly what you need. So what's been really exciting about the KV place is they now have a deployable KV store, which is built on top of SQLite.
Really?
Yeah, so you can self-host it. They've also introduced backups to S3, which I think is also really cool. You can push data from KV into other services like Kafka.
Sure.
And then something that I'm super excited about, but I think it's either in alpha or beta phase, is KV Watch. You can now subscribe to key value stores as well, which I think is
Really?
absolutely incredible if you consider that it's fully distributed. So
Yeah.
super, super exciting stuff in the KV space.
What does it use under the hood? Is it SQLite or what?
In the distributed one, it's Foundation DB, built by,
Okay.
I think it's Snowflake.
Okay.
Or Snowflake or Snowfork, one of the two. I can never remember. But if the self-hosted one, they're using SQLite, because obviously that's not distributed. It's just a local environment.
Okay.
So yeah, super cool there. And then just some other stuff in the Deno space with 1.38. Automatically generate docs. These, again, as always, kind of remind me of docs that you get with Go libraries. It's much more a API documentation than it is a README or anything like that. But
is it more like
super nice.
Swagger or?
I wouldn't even say Swagger. Like, have you ever read through the AWS docs?
I try and avoid any AWS UI.
So it's a representation of like your functions that are exported, your types. It's not really a README documentation. It's an API documentation.
Like, would you say it's similar like TypeDoc?
It's similar to the. Let's take a look.
One, or what's it called? There's a TypeScript like something like this.
I was going to say it's like the Deno docs, but that's
something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar.
Geez, I wish JavaScript would get something proper. Even the TypeScript stuff is like still very much lacking. Okay, so that's good to hear. Might even tempt me to play around with Deno a bit more.
Deno's got DNT. You can like the whole ESM, Common JS stuff.
And do you do like JS doc syntax in terms of like the two asterisks if you want to like add a description to like a function or something?
I haven't seen adding descriptions. I just know that you can generate them and like it does everything automatically for you. It'd be cool if they allow for that. That'd be pretty nice. I'm guessing that annotations are probably a thing, but I can't say for certain. Other things that are exciting: better hot module reloading, better JSX performance for things like Fresh and just general templating. I think they said they've doubled the speed of that. There's now KV cron. So essentially, you can deploy something to Deno and run it like with literally like 2 lines of code. You can set up a cron job. Super exciting. Then Deno workspaces, so you can now write monorepos with Deno.
Nice.
The WebSocket spec is now fully compliant with the WebSocket HTTP2 RFC. Built-in environment variable handling. And I think that's like all the highlights, but it's been a big month for Deno.
Sure. Okay. I might want to play around with Deno again. Because I know like Netlify supports Deno deploy out of the box.
Database also runs Deno for their
yes, that is true. That is true. They do that as well. Okay. Yeah, this is really cool. I'll definitely check it out.
The KV store, man, it's so easy. It's like
with the KV, I assume the KV would be something that sits between your actual database where you model all your stuff and your actual client, or
it's very.
Or would you just or would you straight up just push stuff into KV?
You literally just chuck stuff in.
Oh, really?
So like your repository layer probably is a really important thing there. Like, however you write your data access layer.
Yes.
But like it's you can essentially think of it kind of like a document store.
Yeah. Honestly, so I actually think where like here's the thing actually, like, so I think it would actually compete for a lot of cases where I'm using Mongo. So obviously I use stuff like Postgres and whatever when it's like really heavy data work, but in the cases where I use Mongo, it's usually just like most of the logic is handled on the client side of like Zod and whatever. And all that I'm doing is I'm just using the database as a sink. So if you want to sync your state, between different devices or whatever, it's literally just a glorified index DB that just isn't bound to a specific device. Okay, so I
mean, that's cool, but you don't need to deploy a KV store. If you're using Deno deploy, it's there. You just say kind of store.open and you're done. In that regard, it is really, really cool. You can get up and going in like a ridiculous amount of time.
How does it compare to how easy is it to get running locally?
I think it's baked in. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've run it locally because
I've also had a look at
so easy.
Yes, I don't know if you're familiar with like Terso. This is also something that I've been very curious in. Yes, but it's also a SQLite. So what's really cool, what's cool about SQLite, like locally, it's literally just a file, like which is amazing. So you can just like if you want to do tests or whatever, just have a file that you test against. There's no like spinning up a DB and like importing data and dropping the DB and whatever. It's just a file that you can move around and update and even version control if you really want to.
I mean, locally, your KV instance can, like, if you're running locally, it's based on SQLite, so I'm guessing it's the exact same thing.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm definitely going to play
There
around
must be a way to ingest something. Yeah, I'm now curious about it as well, because that could make running some tests a whole bunch easier.
Yeah. If you can literally just have files in your version control for like specific test environments. Okay. Let me just quickly KV local. Okay. Or maybe have a look at a later point. Okay, that's super interesting. All right.
Man, I'm sure that it exists in the executable.
Interesting. The Deno runtime.
Yeah. I just don't know where it persists the data. That's the thing I'm not sure about. But like, it's
so it might be globally it might be globally on your device or something instead of like a flat file or something. Okay, this is really, really cool. All right. So I said I'm going to talk about this Astro 3. And also when I Googled Astro 3, this is what I found, which is, fun times. Apparently Astro 3 is like some super like, what do you call this? What do you call this art style? Like kind of the Bioshock type vibe as well.
Art Deco.
Is it Art Deco? Yes, Art Deco.
Or it's like retro futuristic kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's Art
Jetsons.
Deco. Yes, you are right. It's Art Deco. Okay, so this kind of Art Deco car thing is apparently in Astro 3 as well. Okay, but so I'm talking about like Astro, like this Astro. So I've been playing around with it a bit. It's really, really cool. I really like the web view transition API stuff they've added. I don't know if any of you guys have played around with web view transitions. There's a really nice demo.
Directly. Astro Records.
Yes, have you? No.
I can't get over it, man.
Have you seen it?
It is so cool.
This is the view transition API.
Yeah.
So this is just plain
they
HTML
do for you. That's the thing that gets me. Is I've used the view transition API, but I've got no idea how it works because Astro does the magic for you.
Yes. So, but this is the thing.
Astro is the browser, though, right? Like, who's actually doing
No, but Astro. Here's the thing. Like, Astro has a really nice abstraction on top of it.
Yeah.
So the view transition API is obviously like a lot lower level. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's lower level. So you need to do a bit of configuration. There's like you're using pseudo selectors and stuff to figure out, okay, this is the new thing, this is the old thing, and whatever. And I think what Astro does is it just abstracts it so nicely. I actually think it's just a wrapper that you put around your router, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas, but
I don't know if you even need the wrapper. I think it's just like baked in. I could be wrong here, but you literally just attach that view transition ID. And it's bam, as long as you're not using Firefox,
Yes.
But it's absolutely incredible. And the preloading stuff, oh man, I'm so impressed with it.
Yes. Yeah, Astro is like, sure, man. Like, I'm really loving Astro. I just wish I could do more work in Astro because, like, unfortunately, the type of skill set that I have isn't that well suited for this type of work. Like, I'm more kind of a interaction dashboard, like things that are super interactive and dashboardy and controls and things type of, that's kind of where most of my experience is, whereas someone like Justin Slack is more, this is like his jam, like more like straight up like visual design, but like stuff like this makes me so jealous that I'm not more in that type of world where you build like these type of design stuff. Yeah.
It's been my experience. So I used to be in that kind of world. I used to work for a digital agency, and I did work for brands like Disney and Kellogg's and Red Bull and Adidas and Nike, whatever. You get what I'm saying. And
yes,
we did websites that had very, very, very high visual fidelity.
Yes.
And it was great because nothing was really the same. And we were doing kind of like top-notch works. This was at the time when CSS3 was coming out, and HTML5 had like just been kind of like created as a marketing exercise and so on and so forth. I call it the Cambrian explosion of JavaScript. That's when that happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Bower was still a thing. Anyway, as a solo operator, it's hard to find clients that are going to engage with you to build that kind of websites.
No, 100%. And like those are the type of things you would build with WordPress and so forth. And
Exactly.
But I do think like a lot of this type of stuff is actually like things like even like Wix or what's it, Squarespace, or like they are kind of cannibalizing a lot of this market share. Because like someone like me might be like, okay, but like just from a semantic point of view and from an accessibility point of view, like the stuff that these things churn out is so gross. And even from a performance point of view, because it's actually, whereas like something like this would just give you much better.
I'm so surprised to hear that. I would have thought that stuff like all of that would be good, better than what an average dev would be churning out.
I can't
define average.
inspected the Wix site's code.
But my assumption would be, well, let's have a look. Inspect.
I don't know if you can trust their front page.
Well,
to be representative of
that is true as well.
Their average user creates their average website on Wix.
I love this little boy here. Window is Wix header 2020 rendered. Just inline that boy, huh? Just inline that boy, huh? Like, you want to set something globally on the window, just inline it.
You can do document.getElement.idea.isConnected, and it'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Like my guess is always like in terms of what these things, their selling point needs, like is usually like super fancy things like parallax transitions and whatever.
Or my pet peeve, which is the fade in of the content as you scroll. And like
scroll
wait 500 milliseconds to be able to start reading every paragraph.
Yes,
Really annoys me.
Yeah, the other one is
when your mouse wheel vertically shifts the page horizontally.
Oh, jeez. Fun
I
times.
have created the occasional horizontal site. To be fair, that was like a massive parallax scroller that actually did tell a story. Like there were characters and movement and that, like it made sense.
A literal story.
Yeah, it was an actual slideshow. I don't know, not a slideshow because it wasn't a bunch of boring slides, but like that was actually my first jQuery plugin to power that.
Well, let me actually see while we're at it. Like, I think we've kind of, is there anything else worth covering? But I think what I just wanted to say is like, oh man, it's such a pity that like those things, because I think like Astro like has a really good story in terms of like allowing you to write really semantic HTML and so forth.
It also allows you to be really lazy and get away with a lot. I'm using Shadcn UI. I'm deploying onto Cloudflare with Cloudflare workers. So I've got API routes. My friends in my backend is there. I've got a managed database. So I'm using Superbase, and my deployments are ridiculously easy. Like I can use kind of heavier front end stuff because of the load directive. So anything that's below the fold is going to lazy load. Like the performance that you get, because I think Shadcin uses Radix under the hood, so everything is accessible. Everything loads quickly. Like it loads as little as possible. You've got a back end baked in. It is such a pleasant thing to use.
So it's worth also quickly touching on some other stuff. So one big thing that I actually I forgot to create a slide for is one of the big shifts is in ESLint. So they are. Let me see if I can find the specific part that talks about this, but they are effectively saying that going forward, they're going to move away from like actually caring or giving the tools like as a platform where you can have plugins and so forth, to really care about like stylistic things like indentation and so forth. And I think that's a good call. So they are going forward mainly going to focus on things like, you shouldn't have, this thing that's like bad for performance, or, maybe you can actually move this function out of this other function or so forth, those type of things. Whereas they are mostly going to leave the stylistic things to stuff like Prettier and so forth, which I personally think is a good direction. Let me see if I can find where they talk about this. Yeah, I can't find it. Now, I don't even know if this is the right blog entry. But like I did share it on ZITech at some point, that they're kind of moving away from, once again, doing the type of stuff that Prettier does and so forth, which I think is good. And also it means that we don't have to like jump through some hoops to get Prettier and ESLint, Airbnb and stuff like that to play nice. I'm curious what your thoughts are, guys, on this.
I think it's good. I think making kind of those kind of formatting changes is really been a little bit outside of scope. You've got to remember ESLint was kind of coming off the back of, I don't know if it was JSLint or JSHint. One of the
JSLint, which was so it was JSLint by Douglas Crockford.
Yeah,
then JSHint was created because he, being Douglas Crockford, didn't want anyone to contribute to it. Yeah. And then ESLint, I think, was created since I think JSHint wasn't built in a way that easily supported extensions. Yeah.
So those preceding tools, that prior art, I think they did have some formatting capabilities, and as a result, that was kind of the expectation. And they weren't really, robust, like formatting tools for JavaScript. There was JS Beautify and a few other things, but it
Jeez, I remember that.
Yeah.
No.
It wasn't like something that you would really hear of people using. I don't remember exactly what the problems were. Maybe it was hard to run, hard to, I don't remember. But that was certainly the case. And like I'm in favor of it. ESLint should stick to linting. And formatters.
That's long overdue, if anything.
Having said that, I don't think it's that hard to get ESLint and any kind of config you're using to play well with Prettier, because you literally go ESLint config Prettier, and that just nukes any rule that would conflict with Prettier.
Sure. But you are making an assumption about like how much the average developer actually knows about how ESLint and all these things work. They just want a copy paste.
You should just need to read.
So,
there's your problem right there.
That's on those days. I'm sorry.
There's your problem right there.
Really not hard
I don't know. Most people just want to NPX.
From what I read in the release notes, they said the big reason for this is maintainability. Having to test everything that impacts the formatting alongside their stuff and having to maintain as they introduce new features. That's really where the problem comes in. And for me, that makes complete sense. Have a tool that does something well. Unix philosophy. Let's lint with our linters and format with our formatters. I know biome is a thing, but
Ben isn't here. Don't worry about it.
No, but like Prettier is a thing. I can't see it changing
Yeah.
anytime soon. Like,
Oh.
and the same for ESLint. And
Deprint is a thing.
yeah,
Is getting more attention nowadays.
totally. But I think it's really valuable having like narrowing the scope of ESLint. I know it's not a lot, but I think a lot of people don't leverage ESLint as well as they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a great tool.
And they don't configure it. They don't configure it as
So
as
the
as deeply
performance
as
is
they can.
definitely something that leaves things to be desired. But the things you can do with ESLint and the ESLint ecosystem,
Yeah.
like the sky is the limit.
Yeah.
It really, really, really is.
Yeah,
You can do
I
so
started
much.
using a really cool one called, what is it? I think Boundaries. I don't know if you guys know about that. ESLint Boundaries, which is really great, which kind of defines where you can import things from. So you can set rules in terms of importing. So you can like have your folder and files like be nicely abstracted. And say, oh, you can't go directly into components and import a random subcomponent. You need to use, it's really, really cool. I've been
Creating like
using it.
encapsulation.
Well,
I was
just
worried you were
rules
going
in
to
terms
mention
of
barrel
where.
import.
No, but no, effectively it's just rules around where you can import from. So, for example, your app can only import, or your views can only import from components or whatever.
Yeah.
Your app folder can't directly import components or whatever, and so forth, which is really, really cool.
Okay.
Because
Assuming
this
you have so basically the idea here is to be able to count on like certain kinds of coupling only and exclude
exactly.
other
Yes.
kinds of coupling
And be
happening
more
in
deliberate in
Prettier.
terms of your encapsulation by means of the file and folder structure. Because what I usually have is I have my components folder, which has an index file, and then I just use that in terms of my API to my components. I don't ever go
So-
into my components.
You can
And
almost
it's-
lint your atomicity of your design.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
another one
And
that I
prevent
like
juniors
is-
from doing crazy stuff. that just no, like it's like
Another
I
one
don't
that
know.
I like.
It's always a challenge, man.
Especially like it's here's the thing. It's that whole thing of dependency inversion. So like actually forcing people to rely on abstractions instead of just importing this random thing from this random component because you're a junior and you think dry is the end all and be all, and I don't want to write this helper function again, so I'm going to just import it straight from some random component and use it in this other component because coupling,
And
Who
juniors
cares?
unintentionally making circular
Yeah.
dependencies, like
And I remove that random helper function that has no relation to anything else in the code base, and my entire code base explodes. And I'm
guys,
like, what
we're
happened
5
here?
minutes over, but I want to propose
5 minutes
something.
over.
Yes.
How do we feel about doing a plug? There is a tool that I'm super excited about that I don't hear mentioned. Skulk has just mentioned his plugin boundaries. Xandor, do you have one for us as well? Something that you hyped
very
about?
quickly, yeah, ESLint plugin Unicorn. So this is a grab bag of really interesting ESLint rules by Sindra Soros.
Okay, sick. And mine is going to be ESLint for files and folders.
Interesting.
This is the nerdiest like plug thing ever, but like these things are all so cool.
Oh, how you name things.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like-
this is really cool.
I know it may not seem like a big deal, but to just have consistency and like get a whole like
Yes.
if you're working with a bigger team to get alignment, like we got one repo
Yeah.
where we've got like 3-4 teams working on, and getting this stuff in place is like makes life a bit easier.
Oh, this is really cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check this out. Unicorn. Oh, cool. I also came across the other day, like there's like ESLint Hardcore or something, which I really appreciate, which is like, ESLint Config Hardcore, which is like what is physically the strictest set of rules you can have on ESLint for a project.
Dark
I
Souls
just
mode.
appreciate- Yeah.
That
Nightmare
reminds me of,
ESLint nightmare difficulty.
There's a Vim plugin called Hard Mode.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Oh, this is
And
really
then
cool.
there's another one called Medium Mode, which is not hard mode. So if you're using
Easy
Vim
mode.
Hard, but not really.
motions, there's an Emacs equivalent as well if you're an evil mode user. But basically, if you're using Vim motions, but the way you jump from line to line, and I don't mean like the next line, I mean like 10 lines down. If you go J J J J J J J J J, you should look at hard mode. You know, it's like the spiritual successor to disabling your arrow keys to get used to the HJKL motions. It's like there's a lot more to Vim motions than just HJKL. Anyway, so that reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah, this is cool. Like I anything by Mr. Sindre, like I'm immediately a fan of. I think my
One of
only
the
thing
cool
here is
rules, let me just highlight the kind of stuff that's in there. Expiring to do comments.
Can you
Where,
zoom
like,
in a little?
Like
Yes,
an
I can
expiring to
definitely
do
do.
comments, depending on what you do, like you can have it expire based on a date,
Interesting.
based
On
on
a
a
date.
version of your package, based on the version of a dependency. It's very cool.
Fail the build if no one fixes this in the next month.
Yeah, you upgraded React and you were supposed to like start using use effect event like in a few places. Fail.
nice. Yeah, this is
Straight to
cool.
jail.
JavaScript, go to JavaScript jail.
Do not deploy.
but
Do not collect $200.
Don't collect
One fix
salary.
your to-dos, straight to jail.
But so like one thing being said, I would probably, and I think this just speaks more to the type of role that I usually play in teams, is I would probably not just pull this in as is. I would probably just go through these manually.
Yeah. That's what
And,
you're
and grab them as needed and not go npm like ESLint unicorn.
No, it is a
ESLint
grab bag.
unicorn.
It's
Yeah.
not like a,
But I would probably go
just
through them
mindless.
manually and figure out, like, just manually include them. Yeah. Jeez, yeah, like, this is some great stuff. Okay. Yeah, but sure, that was like a Mario sound.
Yeah,
was
that's
perfect
the
timing.
notification sound on my phone, and the
For us to stop.
The ringtone is bap, 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 bap.
Well, there we go. Let me just do a plug from on behalf of Ben quickly before we end off. Ben would like to plug Operativa. What is Operativa, Mike?
We are a dev house that likes deving great products. Probably need a little more nuance than that. We focus on building great tooling and empowering developers to deliver good products quickly.
Yes.
We're a big fan of building tools and working with our clients to deliver their products quickly.
All right. Cool. Ben, give that man a raise.
We're always hiring. I think that's another thing that Ben always says. So for anyone looking, reach out to Ben at operativa.dev, if I remember right. Yeah, operativa.dev. And yeah, that's us. We do cool things, and there are cool people. They're super smart people.
I always wonder what this kind of avant-garde vibe over here is. I assume it should be something else.
Yeah, maybe
but-
maybe your Windows machine doesn't support some Unicode character.
Or Operativa doesn't support my Windows machine. There you go.
It's gonna change soon anyway. It's an old logo as well.
Way to say it, I suppose.
Sorry for using this obscure operating system. All right.
Why are you using Chrome, bro? Edge is where it's at.
Yeah. All right, let's end it there. This is definitely going downhill very, very quickly. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Oh shit! Have a great week. I'm used to us having these like on Fridays or something. Okay, have a great week and an even better weekend. Cheers,
Have a
guys.
super one, peeps. Cheers.
Bye.